Chase Thomas the Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello. Welcome back. Chase Thomas podcast, taping this on a Thursday afternoon where I'm still at the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee. Everything School HQ over there, covering the Baylor Bears at SicEm365. It's weird when you're in the South, Paul, when you hear SicEm and you just associate it growing up the Georgia Bulldogs, and when you hear with the Bears, it's a totally different animal. It's always been weird to me to have the SicEm for Baylor along with Georgia.
It is weird. I'm noticing. Do you want me to change this camera angle real quick, or
no? Good? This is fine. I mean, we're good. We're rolling now, Paul. This is we're okay.
Good deal. I don't want to look, Chase. You're doing a professional podcast. I'm a professional. We're professional podcasters. I don't want to look ridiculous, so that's why I'm sticking up for you here, Chase.
I appreciate that. This is our first podcast together, but we're getting off to a great start. So if you want to change the video angle, camera angle while we're rolling,
it's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure it's good for you. No, to your question on SicEm, I had never, and I grew up in the South. I'd always associated with Baylor because my family's from Texas. Now I didn't go to Baylor or anything, but you'd always kind of associated with it. And I went to FSU, and Georgia's not far away, but I would never hear people say SicEm dogs. I would always hear like Go Dogs or whatever. And of course, Georgia was kind of average back then. They weren't they're above average. They were good. You didn't want to play Georgia, but you weren't like terrified of them as you are now. So it's maybe a little bit different, but the SicEm Bears, it's been, they haven't sicked anything this year at all. So I haven't heard it as much around town. That's for sure.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to pick your brain here because I think a lot of folks here in Knoxville and in the Southeast where we've come accustomed to, I mean, look, we got Heupel. We're running a version of a staple, an offense that Baylor fans are quite familiar with, that Heupel has ramped up with tempo and wide splits and everything else. But I think it's interesting that they're having the kind of year they are because, I mean, we're 2 years removed from Baylor having a gigantic Big 12 title win against Oklahoma State. You're looking at, I mean, hey, Dave Aranda's the guy. You've got your long-term answer, Grimes. You pull him from BYU, and things are just feeling good all across the board. Blake Shapen, you feel pretty good there, and I just feel like so much has changed in not even 2 years, Paul, that I don't have the best read on this, and I just want your perspective. What happened to Baylor football over the last 2 years?
So you mentioned that offense that they have, had. I mean, it's changed, look, Matt Rule didn't run it. He ran some spread concepts, but he was more of a ball control. This was a team that was having to be totally rebuilt in the wake of the scandal that they had. And Dave Aranda, after, he had Larry Fedora as his first offensive coordinator, kind of decided that this team was built best to run the wide zone. Now, that was very true in 2021 with the offensive linemen that they had. That is not true today. So that is the biggest thing that's happened, in that the offensive and defensive lines are so far away from where they were just 2 years ago that this is a season that's gone off the tracks because they can't run the ball and they can't stop the run. And those were things they did exceptionally well 2 years ago. And now it's not only something that they don't do well, it's something they don't really do at all. And it's come as a shock, I know, to the coaching staff. And the weirdest thing is that I would be hard pressed to tell you a coach in the country whose intelligence individually I respect more than Dave Aranda. And there's a lot of coaches I think are brilliant guys. But as far as just overall Mensa level intellect, that, it got pointed in the football direction, you could have pointed his brain in whatever direction you want it to go. And he would have concepts and ideas beyond what most people would. And, but I do think that part of of that is that when you are so intelligent, sometimes you don't work fast. You have to work through. Think of it like somebody's trying to make a vaccine. You know, you might have the idea of what's going to work, but you don't just right off the bat make a vaccine. You have to test it and test it and test it and test it. And I think that's where in the modern era of college football, he's gotten a little caught up in the wash because you don't get to keep guys for 4 years and work on it anymore. And then when you go into the transfer portal, which they didn't do after the 21 season and did after 22, you either have to hit right away for guys who are perfect for your system, or you have to buy low on guys that are in the wrong spot and that you can develop. But if you've missed on the first part of it, which are the guys who are going to help you today, which they did, that's kind of hurt them on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, the portal giveth, the portal taketh. I mean, Tennessee is now starting to figure, like, it's weird. Like Javonte Payton, guy, kind of a forgotten guy 3 years ago when Heupel first comes in, and he's just a touchdown machine. He gets his one touchdown first play of the game, then he's out for the rest of it. He gets his start. He was just all touchdown something else, but it was just a surprise portal one. And then Dante Thornton, all this fanfare coming in from Oregon. He was hyped up by the coaches all summer long. He didn't work in the slot, and he hasn't worked all year in the slot. And they move him out wide last week, and it's like, oh, 4 catches, and he's a lot more comfortable, and it's free. It's just, you never know what you're going to get in the portal, and when you live in that space, it's hard. And even as fans and writers covering the team, you're just like, look, I think this is a solid addition. I think they should be able to slide right in, but it doesn't. It's such a crapshoot, it feels like.
No, it is, and part of it, I think, ask LSU fans about their experiment with Harold Perkins as a middle linebacker right now.
Yeah.
And I think they've started to back off it. Since they have started to back off it, the defense has started playing better because just let Craven the Hunter hunt, that's what you need to let him do. Let him go feast. And coaches are very guilty quite often of outthinking themselves, right? So they don't they think like, okay, this is what it's going to be. We're going to have this guy here. And then the experiments, like I talked about before, and you've seen it at Tennessee, like they're doing a 4-game experiment. And then eventually they sit down in a room. Usually it happens during a bye week or something like that. They sit down in the bye week and they say, okay, we can really look at what's not working now. And what's not working is, oh, well, why don't we just move him to the outside and see what happens? And then you're like, oh, he's got 4 catches and 80 yards and he scored a touchdown. He appears to be a matchup nightmare out there. Like, oh, I feel it's an odd thing. And Baylor's been in that a lot. I think they're starting now to move guys around, but even still, they're facing down a precipice here of, if they lose to Houston, who is another abjectly terrible team. If they lose to Houston, the bowl game thing is out the window, because they would have to go undefeated for the rest of the year. And next is TCU, a team that they have a
next is at Kansas State.
Next is Kansas State, then is TCU.
Yeah.
So, and then West Virginia. And the only good news about West Virginia is, in the entire history of that series, the home team has won every game. So, but that's the only thing they can rely on, is a home game, which might be a 3-8 team. So I don't think the fans are going to be juiced up to watch a team maybe get to 4-8. So then your home field advantage is gone, and they're 1-5 at home this year already anyway. So yeah, this is a must win in the worst way for Baylor if they want to have any chance of going to a bowl. And even still, I don't think that it's that guaranteed, because you still have to beat TCU, Kansas State, and West Virginia. 2 of those 3 teams you don't really do well against.
So let's operate under that assumption that they'd miss a bowl game, Paul. Is that it for Dave Aranda?
At this point, I would say no.
Okay.
I don't think anything would ever be off the table. If you watch our show, we have the AD Mac Rhodes on every week, and he's very, very forthcoming with us. And I don't think that they're at that point right now. Now, I do think you have good potential to see a new offensive staff if they make a bowl game or not. I think that will certainly happen. I don't think, and here's where there's two paths you can diverge on Dave Aranda. One is what I think Mack Rhoades is thinking right now is, I've got one of the most brilliant dudes in the world, and if I send him out the door, one day he's going to figure it out for somebody else who's not us. And think about Bill Belichick with the Browns, right? The Browns had one of the most brilliant head coaches in the world and sent him out the door because they got impatient.
Yeah.
Now, the world of college football is different, and you can't be as patient as you were before. But there are shortcuts to success that didn't exist before. So if you can get it right, you can get it right pretty quickly. I mean, you can point to several teams that are in contention for conference titles or the CFP right now that just a couple years ago, if you had been on the old standard of like, well, you got to wait 5 years for him to get a recruiting class in and through and all that, and then we'll know where it is. Well, no, that's not necessarily the case. If you do it right, you can improve incrementally, a lot faster than it was like, well, we got to strip it all down to the rivets.
Yeah.
So I don't think that he wants to do that, because I do think that getting rid of Dave Aranda, you do run that risk of all of a sudden, 7-8 years from now, Dave Aranda is hoisting a national championship trophy for somebody else because he used all the mistakes that he made here and then figured them out, because he's
what's the biggest mistake he's made at Baylor?
I think it's the recruiting and the transfer portal. I think that's the biggest thing.
Does he know that?
I think he does. I think he's aware of it. I think that, and they've missed on some guys. Like they've got to shake up their recruiting. They've missed on some guys.
How much does it hurt just Texas as a whole kind of being up? That TCU making the national title last year, Texas Tech and McGuire and his high school connections, A&M being the force that they are. How much of that has played into it?
Now, the only thing I think that Joey McGuire has hurt by going to Texas Tech, and I love Joey McGuire, right now is just that there are some recruits that he's getting away from them that they would have gotten if he was still there. I don't know if that's necessarily the hire that makes all the difference, right? Like, I don't know if Joey McGuire is going to be the guy that's going to take Texas to that next level. I think he will, contend for conference titles, but it's going to take a couple years. I mean,
but if he's there, are you getting that 5-star receiver that he just got?
Maybe so. I mean, the guy's from just down the road. I mean, he's like literally 35 minutes from McLean Stadium.
Those never feel good. Yeah, those never feel good.
No, look, okay. The 5-star receiver, the other problem is, and like Baylor's NIL needs to get better. I think they're not the only ones who have a problem with it, but compared to Texas Tech, who's got one of the better, more cohesive NIL collectives that there is, they've got to get better.
Are they working to get better? When you're talking to the 80, like, how is that going? Do you think it's coming?
I think that they are, but like we've only heard bits and pieces of that. Like, I think that the people in charge don't want to come out and say like, yeah, we've got these great ideas, but they're not in place yet.
Yeah.
And
because that spooks a fan base.
Yeah, exactly. Like, hey, this is great. Like, well, that you don't want a Jaden Rashada situation.
Yes.
No, that's the worst one, but there's probably like minor versions of that happen other places.
Yeah.
It's just nobody was dumb enough to tell a kid who hadn't taken a snap yet, like, yeah, $13 million, here you go. Like, that was, I know that the University of Florida, who, as a Florida State grad, I do kind of enjoy their failures a little bit, but, and you're Tennessee. So, I'm
here for it.
You're here for it. But I know that the smart people that are there were like, how did this crap happen? Like, are you kidding me? Like, who said 13 million and then didn't have $13 million already? Like, you don't, like, this isn't, I'm going to give you $25. This is 13 million. Like, no, you don't do that. So I think those are the things that have to get through. And I think the other thing, though, that Baylor as an administration top down is going to have to deal with, though, is how do you sell Dave Aranda to a fan base that is bored with him right now? That is not like, that doesn't see it and is worried, because there's a lot of trauma when it comes to being a Baylor fan. They were terrible for 16 years, not just bad and like barely missing bowl games. They were everybody's homecoming game.
Yeah.
They were, I mean, they were never on television for any reason. That's before everybody was on TV, but like you couldn't put Baylor on TV for any reason.
They were Rice for the last 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. You could not do it. And so when Bryles came in and showed people that like, oh, you can hope, you can win conference titles. You can be, and they were in the first CFP discussion.
Yeah.
In fact, they probably should have been in it. If not for Bob Bowlesby, they would have been in it. I mean, really, they would have been in it. And you know, so the fans know what they can be.
Yeah.
And that's where it's hard to see where they're going. And it's hard for most of us to see a path forward that they keep Dave Aranda. But I certainly do understand the aspect of, hey, if this guy's really that smart, let him figure it out.
Yeah.
And that way you're not sitting there going, you know, you've got two other coaches that have come through and out the door, and maybe another athletic director because couldn't get it right. Or Baylor just seems to be the stepping stone job. That's the other thing about Dave Aranda. I can tell you, I don't think he sees Baylor as a stepping stone job. I think he sees it as like Scott Drew for the basketball team. He sees it as a chance to make it his program.
Yeah.
But that's really hard to do. And so I think they're a really interesting crossroads right now about what to do with him. And, you know, I'm not qualified to tell you what the right answer is. I just know what all the factors involved are.
How is his relationship with Ben Arbuckle? Do they have a relationship? Do we bring him back home to Texas? Because that kid, I mean, he's 28, and I can say kid because I'm 32, and it's crazy. He's younger than me. Yeah.
I would. We talked about it on our show about like young guys you can, and I do think that. And
I don't mean as head coach, by the way. I just mean as OC. If you're changing that out next year,
as an OC, look, if Dave Aranda comes back and they have a new offensive staff, the scheme I think has to be spread concepts because what you're recruiting here in Texas are mostly spread concepts. Like those, like if you want people to come in and contribute by the time that they're like redshirt freshmen or sophomores or even true freshmen studs, you need to be running spread concepts. You need to be defensively. I think that Dave Aranda will figure it out. He's a defensive genius. Yeah. Defensively, I don't think the problem is the scheme. I think the problem is the dudes. They don't have the dudes, and they had he had a defense that had Jalen Petrie and Terrell Bernard and JT Woods and you know JT Woods. I don't know. I think he's been injured with the Chargers, but Terrell Bernard and Jalen Petrie are two of the best young defensive players in the AFC right now. So. You know, he had those guys on the team. They had guys who could get after it up front that they don't have today. So can you get those guys back? Then the defense will work. The offense is the bigger thing where you need something that you can recruit to. And as a person who had to sit through many 4-hour and 25-minute Art Briles games, I'm not a huge fan of that offense. Just because it takes a long time and it has part of it is just how you approach it. It has a lot of flaws in it that are kind of like the Death Star, you know, they're not big flaws, but you know, you left that little hole in there that you can blow up. And if you get the right, if it's raining, then you're screwed.
Hold on, are we talking about Tennessee or Baylor right now?
Well, they're running his offense. I mean, it's all I can call the plays for Josh Heupel. I've seen it so much. But if it's raining, you know this. If if the forecast is rain, you're like, oh god, this is gonna be a long day. It's gonna be a long day.
If the forecast is loud crowd, you're kind of like, oh
yeah. So there's a lot of the offense is really fun when it's humming.
Yeah.
But there were things that blew it up. I mean, and so or if you have a 17-point lead against a team who also runs that offense, at the end of the game, new clock rules might help with this a little bit, but you can't, they don't practice running the clock out, so they can't.
Yeah.
They run so many plays so fast in practice that they get to the end of the game. You watch the quarterback, and he looks like he's about to have a panic attack because there's.
Well, that's why Joe threw it deep against Mizzou last year, and people were getting mad about Tennessee running up on Mizzou, and I'm like, y'all, they don't have a choice. These players, it can't just go into the eye. They can't do that when you're making subs.
It's not even about going into the eye.
Yeah,
it's just they can't stand and watch the play clock drip below 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Because then it triggers something and then like, oh my God, everything's wrong. Like, no. There's 5 minutes left in the game.
Yeah. Joe actually did this against Kentucky at the end where he snapped it with like 15 seconds. It's like, we just need to run out the clock. It was one of those, Joe had a great game, but that was one of his things down the stretch. It was like, he snapped it too quick.
And if you take, and I remember telling this to one of the assistant coaches back then. I was like, you guys got to like slow it down at the end of games. And like, we just don't practice that way. I'm like, look, you can run the same play, but if you take that 15 seconds off 5 times and even don't get a first down, that's over a minute you took away from them.
Yeah.
Just by not like running the same play and going. Like you could have, or you run those 3 plays and punt and they have that whole other minute and they do the same crap that you do. So they're set up to do this. They want you to do this. They're daring you to. But I do think that they need to run a spread concept offense because, and there are so many variations of it now. There are so many things where it's not just the Mike Leach or Art Briles like go.
Because like Leach and Heupel run completely different offenses like that. They don't look recognizable.
No, but
they did not.
The ideas are the same, and that you're going to push everybody out. You're going to spread the whole thing. The line splits are going to help you run the ball because the defensive front doesn't really know where to line up and like take their chances. Those kind of things are that's what I think that they need to do. And that's what that's what they do in every high school in Texas almost. The only high schools who don't run it are smaller ones who just don't have that kind of athlete. So they're going to, they're going to get in the old wing tee or the eye or something like that. And they're going to grind it out. And a lot of times those teams do really well and win because
you can't practice for that for a whole week. These high school coaches, I talk to those guys all the time. They're like, it sucks. It's just like preparing for Navy and Army in the college level where you're like, we don't play anybody. So we're not going to spend a lot of our off season preparing for this. Yeah.
So they play this team that runs the eye or the wing bone or whatever they want to call it, the veer. And, they have to sit there with cards and say like, okay, do this. So practice moves slowly. So where you might get 100 practice reps in on defense against the scout offense, you're now down to like 40 because you're not getting it. And the team that you're playing is only running about 6 plays. Yeah. And so, but you don't get any reps against them. And you're like, remember you see that back in front of the fast guy, they're going to hand it to him when it's 3rd and 2. They're going to give him the out ball. They're actually going to give it to him. He's not just there for you to think, what's this guy doing? He's getting the ball and he's going to get a first down. I mean, I did a high school game years ago that was Mart, who is like, they've won a million state titles. And so they're in the spread fast. And they're playing Hamilton, who was at that point, I think they've changed a little bit. They're running the wishbone, the actual Emery Ballard old wishbone. And the fullback had 35 carries for 88 yards and 4 touchdowns and got a first down every 3rd carry. And their coach, he knew, I remember talking to him before the game. He was like, they run the bone. I don't have a guy who can be that guy. He's like, they had a fullback that was like a little squatty, 5'9", 225, like runs a 4.8, but you could not bring him down right away. And just like, he was like a little like trash can, just 3 yards. So, but I mean, that's a tangent, but like those things are different. And Baylor like is running the wide zone, which works. Like if you have the guys,
if you have LSU guys like Grimes has had success with, but
if you have BYU, like he had like, but like they had but they don't have those guys. Yeah. And look, LSU's not running it anymore. Like those teams are not running it. You kind of maybe have to change, which I think Dave Aranda is willing to do. The question is Baylor willing to let him do it? And by I say Baylor, I mean collectively the group of fans and alumni that are going to pressure a decision on his future.
I like it. Well, we'll leave it there, Paul. What can the good folks check out from you all across SicEm365 this week?
Well, every day, Monday through Thursday, I do my own show, The Triple Option on 365 Sports from 1 to 2 p.m. Central. Then I hop on over to our main desk with Smokey and Craig and 365 Sports from 3 to 6 Central every weekday. And then we have our pregame show that we do on Saturdays.
Well, there you go. Go check it out. This was a blast, Paul. Thank you so much for making the time, and we'll have to reconvene again soon.
Anytime you need me, Chase, you send me a text.
Will do. Paul, thank you so much. Have fun this weekend.
All right. Thanks.